357 Magnum versus 44 Magnum. Hand loads with Sierra bullets and some power pistol powder. So I loaded up some of these in 38 special, these same bullets in 38 special and 44 special, and I didn't really like necessarily the performance I got. It was pretty good performance with the 38 special. You can go look at that video, but with the 44 special, not so good performance. So I wanted to juice these things up to see if we can get some better performance if we go up to Magnums. Now with our 38 special, I got some pretty good performance, but it wasn't great. When I did my 44 specials, it was absolutely terrible, even though those were pretty warm hand loads. But I'm gonna go with Magnums today and see if these bullets will perform better. So our 357 Magnum uses a Sierra 125 grain jacket hollow point Sportsmaster bullet, and our 44 Magnum uses the 180 grain semi-jacketed JHC bullet. So I loaded these things up with power pistol powder, and I did use large pistol and small pistol primers, non-Magnum primers. So I didn't go all the way up in charge because, you know, sometimes you have to worry about them blowing out the primers out the back because, you know, standard primers are a little bit softer than Magnum primers. So I did not go up all the way I could go. But what I used for our 44 Magnum was 13 grains of that power pistol, and for our 357 Magnum I used 10.5 grains. So with the 44, the load goes from 10.7 to 14.4, and I use 13. With our 357 Magnum, you can go anywhere between 9.6 and 10.9. I went to 10.5. Our overall length with our 44 Magnum is 1.6, and for our 357 Magnum, it is 1.585. So we're gonna see what we get with these hand-loaded Magnums. They're kind of middle-of-the-road light Magnums. So we're gonna go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then we're gonna do our 10% clear ballistic test. So we're gonna go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. No denim or anything like that in the way to clog a hollow point, just to hopefully see if we can get some hollow point expansion. Then we'll move on to a real-world simulation. 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard right here to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of flesh, so 3 inches and 16 inches is more like an 1.5 inches, and then 8 inches. So it's kind of like simulating a 9.5-inch target with ribs on the front and the back. So we'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 357 Magnum with 10.5 grains of power pistol. I ran the 38 Special Plus Ps with 7.1 grains and actually got an average of 1148 feet per second, which is pretty fast. So we're going up almost 3.5 grains with our 357 mag. I'm about 7 yards from the target. See if I can get a read with these 4-inch barrels here. $13.74. $13.64. $12.81. $12.65. $12.97. It's not great velocity overall. Now our 44 Magnum with our 44 special load with this bullet, and I don't want to be a spoiler here, but in that test I did, we got no expansion with this bullet at all, and I was running that at 987 feet per second on average. So, you know, I had 9.5 grains of power pistol. With this we got 13 grains. So again, now we're going about 4.5 grains. So let's see what we get here with our 44 mag. $12.05. $12.44. $11.71. $11.77. So not very powerful Magnums, but I'm okay with that because the recoil with these was very, very light, and I really like stuff like that because a lot of times you don't have very good choices with personal defense 44 Magnums. So that's exactly what I'm actually looking to achieve. That's why I'm using 180 grains. So even though it's not impressive, it's still good in my mind. So let's add our Ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up, we'll do our best potential shot in the plain clear Ballistics. No denim in the way to clog a hollow point, no rib simulation to slow down penetration. So 357 Magnum. Let's see what we get here with our light Magnum. All right. Now this is where we had complete pass-throughs with 44 special. Let's see what we get if we juice it up a good 300 feet per second. Let's go take a look. All right, so we did get over penetration again. Quite a bit of over penetration there. So yeah, we caught that bullet in that blanket backstop there. I forgot to mention I put that up there. I wasn't honestly thinking I was gonna need it. So I got the bullet here. We'll take a look at that in a second when it cools down. Now that being said, we had a lot of damage going on with that 44 Magnum. Not quite as much energy dump with the 44. Our 44's on top, our 357's on the bottom. But we had a good amount of energy dump for what it is, for being essentially a non-expanding bullet. Now with our 357 Magnum, this actually looks pretty good because we increased the penetration with 357 Magnum. When it was loaded in 38 Special, it actually under-penetrated because it expanded so large. I thought it would penetrate even less, but for whatever reason, when you push that up there to Magnum velocities, it actually puts it to a better penetration. So we're right there with our 357 Magnum at 17 inches of penetration and a little bit of fragmentation, good expansion. Overall, it looks pretty much perfect. Now with our 44 Magnum, we went through 35 inches of ballistics gel, and here's our bullet, flattened out a little bit there. Not really very good expansion, but you know, bone simulation might change what we see there, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Maybe this will perform better with our rib simulation in there. So let's put on our denim, put in our rib simulations, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents our pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent back ribs. So let's see how these do in our real world simulation. 357 Magnum. All right. Let's set that here with our 44 Magnum. See how that compares. Let's go take a look. All right, so our rib simulation definitely changed things up a lot. And some people really don't like that I do the rib simulation. They're like, well, if you use organic gel, that's already calculated in. But one thing I think they're missing with that is that, yes, the density is calculated in, but if you're not quickly hitting something hard like a bone, it's going to change the shape of the bullet more when you hit a bone than if it were just simulated in the density. Therefore, you're going to have a significant difference in penetration if you have rib simulation in there. So that's why I do it the way I do. Very interesting here, though. They both had really good energy dump. Their 44 mag had way more. In our first 3 inches, it's about the same. about the same amount of energy dump between both of those. But we can definitely see a big difference here when we look at our rib simulation. Our 357 down here, really big, and our 44 here, a little bigger than starting diameter, but not by much. And then we look at our back rib simulation here, and only our 44 hit that, and it looks like it's kind of tumbling through, a little bit keyhole, but that is a big hole, so that still counts as a lot of damage. Now our 357 Magnum, I would say this is pretty much textbook good. I don't even see a whole lot of fragmentation like I thought I was going to see. We have good damage overall. We don't have over penetration. And with our 38 Special, when we went through the rib simulation, it did lower that expansion quite a bit. As we're in a 357 Magnum, we still had good energy dump. We still had good tearing. We still have expansion. And we penetrated to 15.25 inches of penetration. So I would say overall, this 357 Magnum load, it's a light Magnum, but it's performing quite well for what it is. Now our 44 Magnum, my number might be off by a ½ inch because I took out that rib simulation, but it's close enough. This stuff is a little less dense anyway. But what we got going on here with our 44 Magnum is 23 inches of penetration. It looks like that nose is squashed a little bit there. But yeah, we over penetrated for sure. But when you look at like ribs and bones and stuff like that, it's not an extreme amount of over penetration. So it's not absolutely terrible, but based on what I'm going for, a self-defense, personal defense load, yes, we had the good enough velocity and light recoil, but its terminal performance really isn't that good. So I'm honestly not sure what the point of this bullet is, because I just cannot get expansion with it. I get over penetration even with low amounts of power here. So it's the only bullets I could find in stock though. And with the 44, that's the only bullet they come in Sierra, from other than going up in different weights. They just come in semi-jacketed, as where the 38 caliber comes in jacketed hollow point and semi-jacketed, but I figured the jacketed hollow point's a little bit better, so go with the best options with both of these, and these are the best options I could find. So yeah, our 357 I would say is a better load here overall, but our 44 would be good for, I guess, a combination personal defense woods round. So we'll take these out of block. We'll take a close-up look at them, then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 357 Magnum and our 44 Magnum. Our 357 Magnum just had a huge amount of fragmentation. We bust off a lot of those pieces of lead. Just a huge amount of explosion going on there, all kinds of fragmentation here. So one might say that's bad. A lot of people like to measure retained weight, but I'm going to here to tell you that, if you had an attacker that survived this, they're going to be out longer before they can attack you again, because that's hard to, that was left in the channel and all different kinds of pieces, different wounds. That's quite a bit of damage going on. Now with our 44 Magnum, we just had that nose deform quite a bit and flatten a little bit there. Interesting that, with the amount of energy that's working with, that can't really expand. You would think that that would expand fantastically for the amount of energy we're working with, but yeah, no expansion at all. Now I go through our rib simulation, things change up here. And this is unique in a lot of ways with our 357 Magnum, because it basically improved its performance. We don't always see that. Now with our 44 Magnum here, there's not really a whole lot of difference there with this versus the one through the plain gel. The nose looks a little different, but it's not significantly different. Now with our 357 Magnum here, we pretty much didn't have any fragmentation at all. And partly that's from going through the denim. The denim will lower that expansion threshold. So really when you get expansion like this, denim doesn't even matter at that point, or clothing, regular clothing, because it's, even if it fills up, there's so much force with so much velocity that thing just opens up regardless. So I would say this bullet, even though it looks funny there with all that fragmentation, I would say this is a fantastic bullet for a light 357 Magnum. Did pretty well. As for this, I don't think we're going to see any expansion with this until we send it through a carbine or something like that. It's just a very interesting hard bullet that doesn't want to expand, even with enough energy and velocity to expand. You know, it's pretty much unheard of to get around 1,200 feet per second with anything and not expand unless it's a solid bullet. So being a hollow point that doesn't expand, that's very interesting there. So that's a close-up look at these bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target. I'm just going to pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target. See if there's a big difference for me shooting these light Magnums and 357 Magnum versus 44 Magnum. So here's our 357. Yeah, those have very, very light recoil for what they are in that revolver. It's kind of like shooting a very warm 38 plus P. 44 Magnum. Takes a little bit more effort to hold on target, but that is nowhere near a typical 44 Magnum. That recoil is more like a full powered 158 grain 357 Magnum out of my 686, and that makes sense because I think the energy numbers are getting kind of close to that. So yeah, not bad overall. Let me back it up and see how these do from some more distance. All right, 75 yards from the target. I just want to see how these things will shoot from me from some more distance here. So 357 Magnum, light Magnums, 125 grain Sierra. Let's see how I can do with these. Right. Kind of having a hard time seeing where they were hitting on that steel, so I was thinking they were all hitting to the right, or to the left, and I aimed really far right, but then I missed. But aiming center, I seem to be able to hit with these. So keep going here. Those aren't too terrible overall. Now our 44 Magnum. See how this thing does. Not too terrible overall. Case ejection for me with this revolver is terrible. That's why I was liked the idea of a hot 44 special, because they do extract a lot easier. But 44 Magnum, it's a challenge. Keep going here. All right, not too bad overall for what they are. Just a little bit easier for me to hit the target with these versus a lot of different types of 44 Magnum. So that's really a perfect load, I'm thinking, for velocity, for kind of obtaining the personal defense 44 Magnum I'm actually looking to kind of create here. It's just that this bullet isn't really particularly good. And those velocities, you know, having that recoil where it's closer to a warm, heavier 357 Magnum, but it's a 44 Magnum. You know, I think I can achieve some really good performance if I find the right 180 grain bullet. I tried some XTPs in the 44 Special. Those were a little bit more promising than the Sierras, so maybe I will go up to doing some Magnums with some XTPs. However, I know from experience, even with light Magnums and XTPs, they tend to penetrate quite far. And I know if I go to a lead bullet, it's probably gonna not penetrate enough and splatter quite a bit and fragment. So it's really challenging trying to find a perfect 180 grain 44 caliber to achieve the type of loads I'm looking for. But as far as the accuracy and the powder charge is concerned, I think this isn't bad. This isn't a bad place to start with the 44. Now with the 357 Magnum now, that was actually perfect. That did way better than what I thought, because when I tested it in the 38 plus P, it seemed like it was a very thin jacketed bullet, wanted to fragment apart really easily at 38 special plus P velocities at 1150-ish feet per second, 1200. But when we go up a little bit higher, 150 feet per second more, it wants to just simply be more consistent at expanding, and it's not over fragmenting, and it's penetrating better. So honestly, this 357 Magnum is kind of perfect for where it is, because with the XTPs I've tested in 357 Magnum, those will also over penetrate. So I'm going to say, this 357 Magnum, maybe even going up to the top charge, the max charge with that would be a really, really fantastic Magnum. We would hit probably 1400 even, and just be still a pretty light Magnum, but do everything we want it to do for a nice personal defense round. Now I will say the flash with these rounds with this powder is a little bit high. I don't like that, but overall, the terminal performance we got, the internal ballistics and the exterior ballistics was really good, and then the interior internal, exterior, and terminal with the 357 Magnum was quite good. So this is just my working up these loads and just catching it on camera for you guys to watch. Interesting here. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.